It made me think that I think this is a fair analogy from in the non-dual or the direct path, I should say, that the whole idea of shadow work, if you think of what causes a shadow, there's light. I know this is just an analogy, but bear with me that the light is cast, let us say, from consciousness,
From
from
behind
pure
me. Yeah.
awareness. And the reason there's a shadow is because there's an object in the way, standing in the way of the light. And that object, metaphorically speaking, is the ego. And that what happens is that people want to keep turning around to study their shadow. There's a tendency, I better get rid of my shadow. I better get back in there and dig around in it and do my inquiry and do my exploration and do my cleanup. But in fact, the shadow will never go away as long as it's the ego that's doing that. And so when the object is removed, now there's full light and there is no shadow. There's nothing to cast a shadow. How do you understand that? How would you argue against that analogy in terms of you saying, well, someone who has awakened, who still needs to do cleanup, do you see where I'm going?
Yeah. And
what would you say?
The third category of people I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
let's say people who are on a spiritual awakening path, and they are becoming aware that there is some unprocessed pain body left over. And how do they know that? Is because they have weird anxiety in the night sometimes, or they have weird addiction lingering, or there's some mysterious chronic contractions, or coinciding with a clear head and some kind of peace and no thoughts and presence, there is a persistent contraction in the belly. So well, yeah, there's definitely,
because the other side of connected to what I was saying, proposing that metaphor, the idea of identification in the fourth way, that things stay in place. A lot of things stay in place or frozen, petrified in us, attitudes, emotional beliefs, patterns, so on, due in large part to identification. And that by virtue of becoming less and less identified, meaning less sticky, as you said earlier, use that term, by virtue of consciousness not sticking so much to what it is seeing, that naturally disperses something. It doesn't necessarily eradicate it right away, but it loosens it up. It's like cultivating the soil, putting a spade in there, and now the soil gets some more air and can receive some more water or something like that, that there's a loosening.
yeah.
And now that by virtue of being less identified, some of that material in there that's been all entangled and entrenched and distorted and become a washing machine starts to clear itself out of its own accord by virtue of there being less identification versus you having to actively go in and
Yeah.
do surgery. What do you
Yeah.
say
So
there?
that's interesting. That's what you are bringing to me. I had to tackle this conflict, because the non-duality teachings, they say, hey, just rest as what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever will come up will come up, and don't be too busy with all of those stuff. Just stay as what you are. That's and that will take care of the whole enchilada. Things will unravel. Basically, things will unravel by themselves in this life or the next, or many life, that it will unravel. You don't need to go into the darkness. Just rest as what we are. Yeah, this is I'm not sure if it is pure non-duality, or maybe there's some distortion, or maybe it is pure non-duality from Nisargadatta or Ramana. I believe so. So you are saying, okay, why not we do that? Rather than why go to hunt for the skeletons in the basement? Why keep hunting for the skeletons? Let them just come of their own accord, right? As you are less identified, yeah.
And another, maybe a middle ground in there would be not that because you're more awake, those things naturally disperse of themselves, but they may be there and continue, that raw material may continue to arise in you as a form of suffering, as a form of material that can be converted into something else, so that it may be naive for a person to think, hey, I'm just going to become this pure being, that there's still, by virtue of just being a human being, there's this deep suffering in each of us in different forms, and it can serve as a catalyst. It can keep you from becoming, what's the word, not jaded, but assuming you have no more issues, which is being jaded in a way spiritually.
Well, I was following this model that rest is what you are, and don't go into a darkness unless it comes to you, and then deal with it. And then rest is what you are. And so that didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Is that I was becoming aware that there were like strong patterns. They were from the past, patterns of separation, patterns coming from actually from that wounded essence and strategic adaptation. They were playing out, but I didn't go to the root of it. Also, there were physical contractions in my body that didn't have an emotion to it. They didn't seem like emotional. They were some of them were emotional, but then also contraction, and some of them were just contractions without emotion. And there were patterns, a pernicious, strong pattern of behavior and of relating, which were totally not aligned with my conscious understanding of myself and of the truth. And those, it seemed like just what am I, or meditating on top of that. They were not going there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became frustrated. And then I started to go towards my teachers like, hey, and listen, there's this, and they will say, there's nothing wrong with you. You are a pure divine awareness. And I already kind of knew that at that time. And I was like, okay. And then they will say, hey, so why don't you just go back to that in which it appears, and this emotion, and there's this feeling. Yeah, just see it, and just, why do you keep going with what you are not? Rest as what you are. Well, you see, you keep going with what you are not. Why don't you just rest as what you are? And keep your attention with this aware openness, like stay as the context, and don't go into going into any particular one. Don't go there. That's why, don't go there. And I like, yes, I started to be bold. I'll be like, hey, yeah, but I don't even know what this is, and this contraction. And they will tell me there's nothing wrong with you. You are aware divine presence, you are sweet divine presence. There's nothing wrong with you. And at some point, I was like, hey, I know, but this doesn't help me. I have anyway, at some point I took a matter in my own hands a little bit, rather than keep following these teachers, who many of them are wonderful and telling me their recipe for awakening. And somehow I started to get whiff of some other teachers that were like, hey, that you need to process that, man. Because if you just, when I feel those contractions, I go back and I meditate, and they are relaxing, and they get kind of quiet, and my mind is quiet, I'm present. I still feel the contraction. It's a little less, and I'm calm with contraction. So that's what I would do. I would just keep going to meditation and witnessing. And anyway, at some point I discovered gradually, and it took me some time to trust myself and trust my experience to be like, hey, there's no danger to go there, man, because I am what I am already. I am this presence. Fuck, it's not gonna go anywhere. And then there's this thing in my belly, and then there's mysterious pains and stuff. So by that time I already studied some somatic psychotherapy. And then anyway, also psychedelic journeys, what happens is that, you know, they bring, like, they pop up the repression barrier open. Usually things are pushed down in vaults. As we become more awake, the vaults get more open and the skeletons are coming out. But some of us, we have strong vaults, man. I had strong vaults, man. And my dad had very strong vault, locked in skeletons in there. But the psychedelic will bring all these things. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And there was deeply so heart-wrenching pains and stuff that will never come out in my... Anyway, so this connection between the basement and the other parts of the house, so it started to be more fluid. So it started to come out more. And then I learned that there was no danger to actually follow that contraction and go. And I discovered, with the help of Scott Killaby's KI repression work, that no contraction. Actually, there were in it, there was buried rage, buried hatred, buried fear, buried loss, wailing. Like, I mean, crying is nothing, like wailing, like in Greek tragedies, like total, like freaking out, dying, and like they were all there. And first of all, they were repressed from childhood, repressed from society, from my dad, you know, because if you don't have tools, if you don't have conscious tools and guidance to deal with these things, it's better they are locked, really. So to survive. So my dad didn't have meditation, consciousness, psychotherapy, nothing. He had just oppression, communist torture, nasty shit. So he had to be strong, survive, raise me up, be strong, survive, and not feel. So I got all of this in here. And on top of that, I got into spiritual work, which I misunderstood it to some degree. So I used myself, in my case, I used some fourth way teachings. I misunderstood them. And maybe I got a transmission from my teacher who had some serious issues to now use those teachings to further push down my suffering, because the ego doesn't want to feel unpleasant. The false sense of me doesn't want to feel unpleasant, you know, and was using transformation of suffering tools, non-expression of negative emotion tools, witnessing and coming back to presence to further not feel bad. And, you know, that's going to get blocked, you know. So anyway, what I noticed is I started to trust myself to go there. And actually, when I stopped listening to the teacher who tell me, hey, don't go there, keep staying as the presence. And I faced those things repeatedly for a bunch of months or years. You know, I felt basically those contractions, they revealed themselves, they thawed out. Yeah, those contracted things were thawed out, and they revealed really flowing emotions that actually there was a whole other work I needed to learn to allow them, man, to allow emotional suffering, to allow it without resisting, without going into the head about it, which is interesting. This is true transformation of suffering, you know.
Because the fourth way, you know, again, the fourth way is, just so people are clear, it's just another blueprint. that's trying to show to serve as a framework for the mind to understand a lot of these things, and principally when it comes to what is consciousness and what is not consciousness, and all of that. But the fourth way framework or blueprint would say, in terms of what you're describing, Mihai, would say something like, this is the value of real suffering in our lives, that when real suffering comes and we don't resist it, and I'm not talking about psychological, somebody accused me of something and my ego is hurt, but deep suffering, essence, a loved one dies, we suffer an illness, we go through a difficult emotional turmoil, something like that. But it's real suffering, and by virtue of us yielding to it, let's say, and letting the current of that suffering flow over us and through us completely without without resisting, that is a form of cleansing and purification equivalent to perhaps the same thing as, I'm not sure you would say that, of what you've been describing, where all of this, and I think people know this when they have suffered, they find that suddenly, at least for a while, doesn't necessarily become permanent in them, for a while they are no longer afraid of other people. They've become very authentic. Their expectations are diminished, and they become very real and in many ways simple. And they are, whether they know it or not, they're more present. And so it is a similar kind of, I'm just putting this out as, this is how the fourth way would teach this, that you don't necessarily have to go and take psychedelics and have someone lead you through your skeletal closet as it all comes out to help you cope with that powerful experience. That what you need to do is be honest with yourself, and then when real suffering does come, let it do its work, you might say.
Yeah.
Because the other question I was going to have for you, I know this is turning into another of our short video talks, Mihai, but it's so wonderful to hear all this, and I think people will benefit from hearing all that you're saying. It's really powerful. That and now I've lost my thought. Oh, it was that where would, through the channel you're talking about, this avenue of inquiry, somatic shadow work, trying to see and acknowledge repressed emotions and go through all of that, is there an end? Does it come to a point where even for someone who's more awake, who sees they need to clean up some things, so as you say, do you, in your studies and in your understanding, is there a point where a person is now clear and clean, or is this as I was saying, a catalyst that's there to some degree for the rest of a person's life, that they can then either use to transform in some way when it does arise, and they can then process it or manage it and transform it? Or someone comes to you and says, ostensibly, hey, Mihai, I've got these issues and I'm willing to do everything you say. Do you think there's an end game here for me? Will I reach home plate again? Will I make a touchdown? Whatever. Where's the end? What would you say?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So yeah, until we do this, until when? Is there an end to it? Will it stop? Do we need to clear all the skeletons in the basement, all the traumas? And did I clean up all my skeletons and the traumas? No, I didn't.
I wasn't asking specifically in your case.
Yeah.
Yes.
To me, the way it became maybe last few years, it's more like, hey, this is an assignment on my spiritual desk. You get some assignment that is obvious. Hey, there is this trigger with my partner, and this pattern is happening, and I have contraction in my chest. Or this obvious, there's something there. And now I know better. I know this is not just a sensation. This is not a sensation that I'm this is not me. Yeah, I know this is not me, but I know there's more in it, and it requires me to investigate. Yeah, because there's a sense of suffering. So that's how I look at it. And I take this from Francis Lucille. He will say, hey, meditate. Well, for him, meditation means self-remembering, basically. Rest as awareness. Meditation is not that begins and ends. Meditation is more like our natural state. So he says, meditate. When there is some suffering, investigate. Investigate it. See what's this about. Bring awareness, explore, see what it's out, make it conscious, And in that process of conscious investigation of some pesky content, it discharges usually, if one is skillful enough. And I mean, it may not discharge in one session, it may take like a year, or it may take a few weeks or something, but it discharges. And then you are back to meditation. And here's this thing: meditate, investigate, celebrate.
Oh,
hey man, just enjoy life, man.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So meditate. If there's a problem, you investigate, you look at it, and then it corrects, relaxes, and then you are back in meditation. And the point is one point is to, and then you are able to enjoy life. Then you are really able to enjoy life. And I talked to you last few months now, and I see that you are able to enjoy life. You are walking and on the beach, and there's simple pleasures. You are thoroughly enjoying it, because surely your mind is not too busy with stuff, and you don't have too many contractions, and your relationship is in order. There's not big conflict. So yeah, enjoying life. So
it makes me think too that when you said meditate, investigate, before you said celebrate, I like that part. I hadn't heard this before, but it shows that self-observation and self-remembering do go hand in hand, and they continue to go hand in hand. And so the investigate is like the self-observation. The meditate is like the self-remembering.
yeah,
to me, that's
yeah,
how that's the
Yes.
thought process that came to my mind when you said that.
yeah,
And that's a beautiful thing. It's not like you use self-observation to reach the ultimate self-remembering, and then you're just self-remembering all the time.
Yeah.
But as long as we're human, at least in human form, self-observation is the natural counterpart and can be a conscious counterpart
yeah.
to self-remembering.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm speaking, but I wanted to hear you continue.
That's interesting what you say, because usually we look at self-observation as less than self-remembering, like self-observation being observing content, observing thoughts and feelings, sensation, that will lead us to to being aware of the sense of being, as well as this stuff. But what comes up here now is that as we are able to more ongoingly remember ourselves, like resting as the being, if there is a disturbance in the field, we are investigating, which means you turn the telescope or the microscope towards that thing.
Yes.
And you are I'm piercingly looking in this contraction in my belly. And
while remaining behind the telescope.
Yeah, but you see, when there's something like that for me, I'm really interested. It requires special effort to see what's underneath that contraction and to thaw it out and go underneath. So I don't want to worry too much about being the awareness, because I'm already the awareness.
No, but I mean, you are looking at the contraction. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
you are going down into the belly.
Yeah, it's an object.
You're conscious of the fact
that
you're going in there.
Yeah, it's an intentional, conscious effort to instead of escaping that unpleasantness, I am facing it very warrior-like, with skill. And I find out that contraction says I need to hide. I have to hide because I'm afraid. And then I'm sad. This will come.
This is why I like the sword in your logo.
Yeah.
You have that circle of being, Yes.
So,
And then that sword, which kind of speaks to what we're talking about now. At least that's how I interpret it.
yeah. So until when? You know, for me, I don't think like this. Some people come and they are like, hey, but okay, I get it. There is the programming work I need to do, and there's this method that you have, and how much time will it take me? Yeah, 1 in 4 people. How long would you think I will take me? And I'm like, well, depends how serious you are and where at your level of consciousness and how much you want this and how. So, already that attitude is faulty. So I don't looking at it, oh, when I'm going to be done with this, because it means that I'm going to arrive somewhere. I'm going to arrive somewhere at happiness after I have processed my pain body, which is also collective. I mean, it's a lot of pain body and the whole humanity. So yeah, I think that I'm okay. That might be all my life, things coming up. Also, I get the sense that intuitive sense and a little bit of experiential verification that as we process out more our personal childhood stuff and adult stuff and even family stuff, in my work with myself, I totally see my mother, father, grandfather's patterns, which they're theirs, but they are in me, so they're ours, and it's my problem. They are not mine, but they are my problem. So as this diminish, then apparently you get kind of collective, the humanity, and then even when things are very clear in my personal house and my let's say my basement has been thoroughly investigated and it's nice and there's even light there and it's now not a den, it's not a den, it's like nice garage with whatever. Even then apparently you get hit by some collective suffering or some feeling for the suffering of humanity and of the slaves and of the African American and of the wars that are happening. So apparently we get more sensitive, but not in a bad way, like very aware of things, not just in my body mind, but in the body of humanity. So we feel the hurt that we do to each other unconsciously, and we feel it, although I may not be doing it, So, things get lighter, man. So, as one of my teachers used to say, you start traveling lighter. And then there'll be long periods of no big investigation. And, and then something comes up, and then the relationship will show you. Things in the world will bring stuff that are, if you create any trigger and stuff, it means there's a little bit left over. But I'm not looking at it like the urgency to finish it, to get to it on the other side. It's more like, hey, that's the path. And I'm happy that it's getting lighter. And I have much, much less suffering. And I have much, I was already a therapist and somehow of a teacher of sorts, teaching welcoming feelings, while I myself was not fully able to welcome. So it took me, even now I'm learning more to welcome this more. Actually, this is a big thing. You ask me what I do with people. Resisting feeling, resisting unpleasantness is creating a lot of suffering, because there's let's say sadness. They say this has 5 pounds, 5 pound sadness. I'm afraid to feel it unconsciously, and I push it down. Now I'm dealing with 5 pound sadness and 5 pounds of resisting of sadness, 10 pounds, and fear of this, the 15 pounds. So I'm managing 15 pounds because there is this mechanism inherited from my ancestors to push down my emotion, or not to feel it, or to do positive affirmations on top. Anyway, so this mechanism of resisting emotion or resisting energies in the body even a negative thought. Sometimes a thought comes like, oh man, I'm stuck. Oh man, I don't think I'll ever have a good relationship. We are like turning away from them or spinning into them. It's really hard to just, okay, I will never have a good relationship, man. Let's just look at this for a moment, because this is not just a regular thought. This thought needs some attention, because if we leave this fish uninvestigated, it's going to create a lot of suffering. Yeah.
What's interesting in all this too is, again, this, to connect this back to the fourth way system, the idea of unnecessary suffering and imaginary suffering versus real suffering, real trauma, real these fears, these layers, as you described it, keeping essence repressed. And so a person is no longer authentic and they're afraid to show themselves and be themselves and all that. And then there's this other, which is the world of personality, the imaginary, where it could be imagination. I'll never have a good relationship. Is that when to know if that's something, as you said, that merits attention, and when to know that's just, because somebody didn't seem to show that they were attracted to you when you were attracted to them, and you take it personally. Mm-hmm. Your ego, your imaginary picture of yourself is offended. And it's not essence, it's not a deep wound. It's a psychological, it's a piercing of our psychological armor, and we don't like it. So this is another whole, maybe that's for another discussion, but the whole area, because everything you've described so far could fall into the category easily of real suffering, real mental, emotional anguish in people. And yet there's all this other unnecessary, imaginary, we imagine scenarios, unpleasant scenarios, things like that. So this is, anyway, it's just the light. I just feel this light kind of washing into the whole fourth way system and saying, no, wait a minute, what's what? So this has been so useful to cast fresh light on the whole arena of what's going on when we are suffering and don't know it, and when we aren't really suffering and think we are suffering.
Yeah.
This is it. Yes, it's a big area.
Yes? The fact that I so-called abandoned the fourth way years ago, and then I went into all of this stuff, and I'm telling all these things, and I had all the experiences, it didn't lead me to the point that, oh, forget about fourth way. On the contrary, having seen what I have seen, so it's not theory. This is with people like cooking and tears and shouting and like on the really not. I'm not exaggerating. So I've seen the psychic of the human, of the suffering, our suffering. So it only confirmed the map of the fourth way, and I can put all that I have said in clinical therapeutical terms. I can put in fourth way terms, and it's like, hey, low level of consciousness, we are in the second state, asleep and identified. Essence is hurt. It creates false personality. False personality is tight, painful, creates inauthenticity, patterns. And then there's real suffering in essence that happened as a child that creates a certain kind of that suffering from essence and trauma that is not processed. It actually it fuels unnecessary suffering later in the ego. So people, they come to me, and initially I can see that, hey, this is unnecessary suffering, meaning that, dude, you are believing this shit is not true. You are doing this to yourself. It's not true. There's nothing wrong with you. You can't do this. This is not true. All of this imagination and fantasies you have about other people, they think of you, and this inner considering, I can tell them, dude, snap out of it, man. This is all bullshit. It's not real. That's true. That's true. However, their propensity to embroider that particular kind of shit is linked to the fact that the world is not safe because daddy beat me and mommy wasn't there. and then the world is not safe, and then that's I'm not safe at some root chakra level. I'm not safe. You know, we need for the machine to develop well, feel safe, to have all these experiences in childhood that, you know, but if I experienced such a thing, not me, I was lucky, I didn't experience that, but many people, this, then all the life will proliferate these flowers coming from the root of the trauma, that people are tricking me and people out to get me, and you know, mysteriously I'm going to attract people that are out to get me, that keeps confirming that it's not safe and it's not just, and it's rotten here, and you know, it's very mysterious how it works here. It's like a live.
Well, you know, just listening to you now, and as a result of this whole conversation, Mihai, I am seeing a new connection between the ideas of real suffering and imaginary suffering. Whereas before, it was easy to think of them in sort of like in two containers. And one, you know, you can throw away because it's all imaginary. And then the real one you have to transform. But in fact, the way you put it, that the unnecessary suffering, the form it takes, can easily be an outgrowth, albeit an artificial outgrowth, from the real suffering.
From the past.
In our essence, yes, and in the past. And another side of this is that I think there can be a tendency to think there is something wrong with me because I have all this that needs to be siphoned out, cleaned out, seen, etc., as opposed to this sort of being in varying degrees what it means to be a human being on planet Earth. That we go through these experiences and essence does get repressed or does get wounded, or this isn't bad that this happens. Do you know? To take
it's not a mistake.
It's not a mistake, and to take the negative view of it out of the picture and say, no, this is not a negative thing. This is a thing. This happened. And now you want to see it and be more conscious of it and understand it in that context. But it's not, you don't want to start right away from the fact that it's a bad thing. Because before, when we were talking, I was thinking about the fourth way too. You know, you can't approach the fourth way necessarily. Well, you can, but it begins with this idea of you want something higher. You're attracted to something higher, something more real. It's a return to your more real being. And anyway, it just occurs to me now, talking about it out loud and making this new connection for me that I had not really seen before, that our unnecessary suffering, it's not disconnected from our real suffering.
Yeah.
It's an outgrowth. It's a natural outgrowth. And in fact, the unnecessary suffering we experience in that regard can be used to point to some of the things you've been talking about.
Yeah. So now let's say we do let's say fourth way module, and we have people that are resonating with this idea that oh, as I'm asleep, and there's this potentiality of awakening, and I resonate with this Gurdjieff stuff, and I feel self-remembering. It's like, whoa, it's like a whole other thing. Like, anyway, yeah. So they'll come to us and they will have some psychological problems and some recurring pattern. They will say, hey, you know, there's this, is like, so the way I would do it now, looking with all the vista I have, you know, if people, I feel like if people, they had less trauma in childhood, less trauma, serious trauma, let's say abuse, verbal abuse, deep critical, being shouted at a lot of times, put down, hit, abused, sexually, emotionally, physically, neglect, loss of connection, early childhood, you know, this kind of group homes kind of stuff, loss of mother, father, all that. This is, from childhood, from essence point of view. I'm not talking about war trauma, Yeah, there's a whole other thing.
Mhm.
So the stronger was the unlovingness, and the younger it happened, the more impactful it is. For, if I'm 20 or if I'm 17 and some bad shit happened, it will impact me less than if I were 6. If I'm 13, it will impact me less than I'm 6 or 4 or 2. Yeah. So I would say that if people have been raised in overall safe, decent, they were lucky from lucky or whatever, good karma. I don't know. So, a lot of the psychological problems and all these things, they can be handled with witnessing, with self-observation, with the right knowledge, with unpacking, with a little bit of processing. Those will the knots will relax and things will go away, yeah, overall. But if people have they had some strong hurt imprints many times, I think that they may need also some more specialized kind of deep cleaning, and actually to because there was some deep damage, some crack there, and actually it can heal it. So one can do a little bit of targeted trauma work for that to be less oozing pus.
I guess I'm thinking too in terms of consciousness, strictly from the perspective of consciousness. The teachings, most of the teachings, and the fourth way included in this, teach that consciousness was never wounded, consciousness was never hurt, consciousness was never chastised, not felt, because it's a different dimension of being. And so it still calls into question, or I guess I could say that it's still important to remember in terms of awakening that what is trying to self-realize is consciousness. And even the deepest sense of personal hurt that may be so valid, that is not consciousness. And this is why I think that your teachers you referred to, they say to someone, you're a divine being. You're fine. Nothing's wrong with you, bro, as you said. This is what you're referring to. You're basically saying you're speaking to consciousness in them. Consciousness, bro, you're fine. Nothing's wrong. Nothing ever happened to you. You were the witness of that. And then there was a reaction that happened, in essence, in the body, in the mind, in the psyche, in the ego, and it formed the ego, or it distorted the ego, or it had an effect. But it is not you, consciousness. But then this is where the greatest mistake is made often, is when a person can hear that, and their mind hears that, their sense of self, hears that and thinks, that's me. And now I'm going to rest in awareness, meaning I'm going to rest in that feeling. And I want that feeling of me to be a calm, peaceful, happy, always fulfilled feeling. And that's not consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's not what is meant by the peace that surpasseth all understanding, and so on. And so that's really the end of my thought, just that it's easy. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was done.
I sometimes use this term at the end of some guided meditations. I use this, what you said, hey, that consciousness, which is operational definition of it is that whatever it is which is real, which is hearing and seeing these words and images right now. Yeah. So consciousness, I say, hey, this consciousness, that which is aware right now, has never been scratched, has never been hurt by any trauma you experienced. It's the same. It hasn't been diminished, hurt, crumpled, untouched. This is true. This being said, the hurt deeply affected my essence and my machine. And now my machine, the body-mind, is strongly unbalanced and strongly off kilter. And it cannot find presence in that way. It cannot. And it's suffering. And so yeah, it's true. Consciousness as the soul has never been scratched by that. But this is not, it's not useful to the person because they are tied in knots. So they need to wait until maybe they die to kind of get back to the peace that passes understanding, you know. So I do say this, hey, it cannot be scratched, but you know, there's some work to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't want to use this, hey, you are aware divine being and consciousness is untouched, just find that, be that, and there's nothing to do, no effort to be made, which is a whole branch of so-called called radical non-duality.
Mhm.
Radical non-duality, which kind of sounds cool, sounds like the ultimate.
And I've also heard it called, is this right? A pseudo
There was, I think,
non-duality.
Neo-Advaita.
Neo
Advaita,
Advaita, right.
where
Mhm.
you just understand that
Yes.
you know, it's just that. It's apparently just that, and there's nothing to do, nowhere to attain, and no practice. So I find that actually dangerous and can create a lot of physical sickness. Yeah, because if I have a lot of unprocessed stuff, and then I am deeply committed and deeply dedicated to a teacher that I love, like, I don't know, Tony Parson, let's say. He's a big promoter of that. And, you know, I like Tony Parson in a way and respect to him, you know. But if one has a lot of unprocessed stuff and resonates with a teacher like that, that says there's nothing to do, there's nothing, nowhere to go, nothing to attain, no practice is needed, then this is going to not going to meet that person where they're at, is not going to address their suffering. They are going to keep trying to get what Tony says. They are keep trying to trip themselves into some, and they won't be able to do it actually.
Yes.
And their stuff is going to keep coming up. And now they are going to get the message there's something wrong with me, and I'm spiritually this and that, and it, or even if they're seriously committed, then may in some way force themselves in some way, and they create a disconnection with their body. So it starts to be some head awakening.
Well, you're talking about the body and the mind, or the four centers, trying to be consciousness, and they can't.
Yeah.
And you're right. They will just twist themselves in a bigger knot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't get there from there.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, because it's true. I just want to know, it is actually true what Tony says.
Yeah.
But you have to understand it from the proper dimension and realize that the other dimension is still here. Yes. What appears is still appearing, even though it's just apparently happening. Yes.
Yeah. I did at some point certain states, or also psychedelic state and states of whatever, and I just listened to Tony Parson, that I usually don't resonate with that as a form of teaching. I find that it's a bad teaching. But however, I was listening to Tony, and it was like, yeah, yes, it was true what he was saying. It was true. But you know, I may be wrong, but that form of teaching is not helpful for many people. I lost the thought here too.
Well, maybe we can stop there. We've covered a lot of ground as usual, and you've said a lot. Yes.
As long as there is any suffering of sorts, mental, emotional, somatic in the body, there is something to do. There is investigation to be done. There is inquiry to be done. So as long as there is suffering, there is something you need to inquire. Yeah, that's my take.
And I really liked what you said earlier, Mihai. Meditate, investigate, celebrate, and the celebrate to, as you say, this is things you start to travel lighter, more lightly, and
Yeah.
that's worthy of celebration, even though there's still more baggage that we're carrying.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice cap to put on top. Remember that to celebrate, to appreciate
Yeah.
what we're doing here with all this. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's extraordinary. Thank you for the people listening may think that we rehearsed this, or that but this was not at all the case. I wanted to sort of just see what you would come up with, and I wasn't even sure how to ask what I wanted to ask. So it's been wonderful to hear you elaborate, and so thank you for all that.
Yeah, thank you for your curiosity and having these great questions. And yeah, I mean, I can't go back to a fourth way that is mental and disembodied from this painful stuff that everybody they have in their body, and also the ones they don't feel it. It's even worse because it's there and they have been so disconnected from their body. So I don't want to teach some non-duality or fourth way is encouraging bypassing and encouraging avoiding suffering and transcending without meeting everything. So and
they only remain abstract if we remain abstract in relation to them, because the fourth way, non-duality, these teachings, all of them are an abstraction. They are a blueprint, or just a framework. It's a way of bending your mind into that shape in order to try to perceive and understand these things on the mental level, the emotional level. But they are not the thing itself, the truth, the realities we're talking about. And so I almost get the impression, Mihai, that that's what happened for you. Maybe the fourth way had become more, no, I won't say more of an abstraction, but it wasn't as real for you. And then when you came back to it, you realized how real it was because you were more real. And you could see its merit, its value as a series of blueprints.
Yeah. I got stuck by not going into some things. I got stuck.
And to me, this is even an inner meaning of the idea of abandoning the system in the fourth way. It means you abandon your belief that the blueprint is the real thing. You see it's just a blueprint. It doesn't dismiss its value or its merit, but now you're more interested in what it's revealed to you in your own experience and in your own being. And you're not relying just on a map, just on a blueprint. And so you can abandon it as concept and embrace it as reality, embrace it as truth, I should say, a version of the truth.
I mean, these are maps, and maps, like now with these devices, the maps are so accurate, However, the map of the Amazon jungle or whatever, no matter how perfect and GPSed out and satellite, is not the walking in the territory of the Amazon jungle. Yeah. So it's not, no matter how accurate and current, and a lot of these maps we received, they got diluted and distorted and damaged and lost and confused to the point that the people who created them, let's say Jesus created a certain map, or Buddha created a certain map, they would twist in their graves if they were to know what happened to their teaching. And I know that they are not in the graves and all of that, but like, it will be painful, So yeah, so this will be like diluted, corrupted maps that were washed through the waves of time. Yeah, so you have a better map, but even the map that is very good and accurate, it's still not the territory.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Yes.
All right. Let's stop here. And for those who enjoy this, and I believe that there are not very many, but let's not limit ourselves. So you want to enjoy this and actually use a map to walk the territory, you know, we are going to start a fourth way module, 9 weeks, nine consecutive weeks, starting, I think, January 6th.
Meaning once a week.
Once a week, yeah.
Yeah.
with knowledge, as well as you know, customized exercises and meant to apply and sharing. So,
And the option for people to ask questions or send in questions via chat, and or send in questions ahead of time.
yes,
Things like that. We want it to be not just didactic, but communicative, exploratory, and so that the more we can understand the feedback, the better it will help us present what we're trying to present in the way we're trying to present, in the spirit in which we're trying to present it.
Yeah. Also, I already started to get some questions from people listening to these videos, this series. So I'm accumulating them. So feel free to send it to me by email. That is there, or as a comment, and we'll get to them. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mihai. Thank you again, as always.